So our final guest is Barry McCrossan. Barry's from Birdseye, and Barry is a senior commercial leader within Birdseye, business unit director. So Barry is in that buyer-seller relationship. What I'd love Barry to do is tell us the story of how he stepped up in his business and the story behind that, and also to share some tips for us as well, Barry. So Barry, over to you. I'm going to spotlight you.
I'd love to. I'm a classic salesperson. I always just like to have PowerPoint just behind me. From my point of view, I started my career in an industry that wasn't FMCG and is actually a very macho, manly, old school, bit sexist industry. I didn't last too long in there. But I'm also gay. But I came out to my friends and family in my late teens when I was about 20 years old. And I didn't do it at work until I was probably 30. So that has led me to question, what led to that decade? Why could I not bring myself to work? And it's become more and more important for me whenever I'm looking for jobs, when I'm, just looking around to see who's in the space, who's talking, because I'm living proof that's important. So I've been with Birdseye for 3 years now. And I think there's some similarities with what Nicola was saying about our journey and their journey. But one of the things that really attracted me to the business was we've got a slogan or a motto which is "Just be you." So it's all about bringing your true, authentic self to work. And it probably predates us getting our heads into inclusion and diversity really well. But it was something that was explained to me in the early days. And I think much like Muller, it was actually the girls that led the way. So if I just go on to the next slide. So I would say, started really taking this topic seriously during lockdown. I think it was a bit of a pause and we were all in such a strange world. So I would imagine that's not just us that we're in that situation. Our Woman in Nomad network, which sounds very similar to Nicola's experience, that's about 6 years old. And then between that time, we launched the Just Be You campaign. We started talking about men's mental health as well, but it was a focus on gender. So then during lockdown, when we were all locked away on Zoom calls a lot of the time, it became. It was funny, it was a bit of we had an organic thing where we started to see networks pop up. So I set up the Rainbow Alliance, which is our LGBTQ+ network. That was independent of what the business was doing. But meanwhile, the business was really working on an IND story and an INCD policy and an ambition for where we got to get to. And what was really interesting, whenever I started to get really involved in it, we talked a lot about the moral and ethical benefits and need to be having these conversations and doing it. But actually, it's not just nice to do. We've talked a lot about retention and engagement and everything else, but actually there's some bottom line benefits to it as well. So McKinsey or whoever it might be will throw a lot of massive stats at you about the difference whenever you can drive a diverse culture. So as I said, I launched the Rainbow Alliance, so I've got first-hand experience on the pitfalls, the excitement, the fatigue of launching an employee network. But at the same time, we launched our Disability Alliance as well, which talks about all things disability, and they're doing some great work with the likes of Guide Dogs for the Blind. We had the Guide Dogs in for Christmas, so that's nobody got any work done that day, but they're doing amazing work, and then we're starting to bring that out into our brands. So our Aunt Bessie's brand is starting to do some really, and you may have seen some of our advertising talking about and our packaging as well. And we launched the Heritage Network as well, which are great for telling me about, well, it's the best for actually getting some really good food for different religious and specifically cultural festivals. So we've got gender covered, disability, LGBTQ+, and heritage. So those were, as I said, some were organic, some were more as a result of the conversations that we were having. And I would say we're still on a journey, but we're starting to mature now in the I&D conversations we're having. So we sat down together and we came up with what our priorities are for 2023, and want to strengthen all our networks. Want to be a little bit clearer about where we want to get to, but our 4 priorities are really focusing on facts. So getting data, not being hamstrung by data, but trying to get a little bit more data to inform our decisions, because I'd say a lot of it's been done on gut and instinct so far. So, for example, in our employee survey now, we're trying to get a little bit more demographic data, but it's opt-in. But actually, we're measuring ourselves on how many people are choosing to opt into that data, and it's going up, so it's going the right way. And we're asking specific questions about: do you feel like you're working in a diverse, inclusive workplace where no matter what your personal circumstances, you can thrive, etc. Our inclusive culture comes through the different networks, but actually it's about day-to-day and living and breathing, and having some of the live conversations that we are doing. Inclusive leaders and inclusive hiring. So I've been a bit of a guinea pig for that over the last year. So we've started to roll out some really, really formal training around what does an inclusive leader look like? How do they behave? How does our unconscious bias inform our decisions? What are our unconscious bias? So was a little bit shocked at some of the results I got, which that's unconscious, isn't it? So, but yeah, so that was a really, really eye-opening thing to be doing. And then going down to inclusive hiring. So being aware of our blind spots and making sure that whenever people are coming, us as representatives, when people are coming into our business as potential employees and then hopefully employees, we're sending the right messages and doing the right things. My 6 tips, and these are truly personal tips, they are not corporate tips at all. Echo chambers are something you have to face against. So you will see the same faces going to the same events all the time. So it's how do you reach those people that think this doesn't particularly apply to me? And I think there's a little bit of a carrot and stick approach. So we've got a section of all our objective setting document, which talks about I&D and what each person is going to do with it, but also something I found really useful is to talk about personal stories, get colleagues to share their vulnerabilities, to show that side of them that you might not see in a boardroom or a meeting room. Be conscious of overload. That could be in messaging, which I think we stumbled on a little bit, but also in the same people doing the same work all the time when they've all got day jobs. And sure, a little bit of funding doesn't need to be millions of pounds, but make sure there's a few pounds set aside to get things off the ground. Identify your advocates, so people who will come to your events, spread the good news, but also who are the doers and who are the people that are actually going to make things happen and affect that change. And then we're working on currently encouraging intersectionality across the different networks. So if the Disability Alliance are running something, I have a charter to say that I will turn up and I expect the reciprocity in that. The other thing that I forgot to put down there, you will feel inertia when you're starting off. You will feel, I just don't know where to go next. I think there are external bodies like Uspire and others that can help, but also just do something, because most of the time you'll be on the right line. Just don't let yourself get into that funk that I may have got. I'm going to blame lockdown for that anyway. And that was it for me. I think I'm handing back to you, Amanda, if that's okay.
Barry, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your contribution.